and we can So again, welcome to the 3D-HPN monthly forum, 3DEP this month as well. For those of you that are new to the forum, 3D-HP for the Nation is a USGS NISGIC cooperative agreement intended to engage state and local governments and private sector partners in the derivation of a 3D stream network and hydrologic units. As part of the project, I've got a little bit slow down here. I just wanted to go through a few of our current activities. As you see, our activities are listed on the right. So we do facilitate this monthly forum. I wanted to let you know that if you ever want to go back and look at materials, PowerPoints, we do produce a Q&A document after each forum. You can go to the NISGIC Learning link, go to projects and go down to 3D-HP and you can find past resources. You do have to register with the site, but if you're here, you likely registered for the forum, so you should have a login. Establishing a 3D-HP for the Nation communities at mynisgic.org. We do have a 3D-HP FDN interest group. Again, if you did not receive this invite directly or this information directly, please join that group. And I did want to notify you, let you guys know that we will not be having our quarterly meeting in December due to conflicting meetings and the holidays. I know you guys are all boo-hooing to have one less meeting during the holidays, but I'm sorry about that. Other activities, we inventory state regional 3D-HP experiences. Let me get that. I'm going to give you two things in the chat. If I can get back to my chat. Things seem to go away. Please enter your, if you have experiences, we have there's the learning link and there's the interest group communities. And then the experience inventory, we have two versions, a short form and a long form. So we encourage you to share your information there as well. Tasks that we're developing, we've developed a set of critical factors for consideration for both USGS and NISGIC as we move forward with 3D hydrography. And we have the first document that we have a set of coordination. I'm sorry, I'm trying to copy paste and talk at the same time, not my gift. I should just paste these all in at once. We have developed guidance part 1 on building the statewide 3D hydrography community, and that document is available at the link in the chat. We're currently working on a second part, which is an inventory of your state 3D hydrography activities and resources, and that should be available soon. I also want to say that we've got a new activity and we're going to start investigating culvert mapping, and we want to collect information about methods that states or others have used in culvert mapping, what worked, what didn't, the lessons learned, etc. We will engage in a dialogue on this. We probably will develop a set of lessons learned, and we will be holding a workshop at the NISGIC mid-year meeting on this topic. So if you have experience with the culvert mapping and you're interested in participating in the collection of information and or the dialogue and workshop, please reach out to me, let me know. And we will be sure to include you in that email discussion as we move forward with this activity. We establish and manage the NISGIC for the Nation Info Hub, another link coming your way. And that is managed by our own Phil Worrell, who does an outstanding job. And I should mention that these other items above are accessible through that hub if you just want one-stop shopping for your 3D-HP for the Nation resources. And of course, we work with USGS to provide program feedback on document strategies and resources. That's where we are with the project. I am very happy to introduce our speakers today. We have Ashley Chappell with the NOAA Office of Coast Survey, Allison Jason with the USGS National Geospatial Program, and Sue Hoegberg, who's with Dewberry. And with that, first I want to tell you that you can enter your questions into the chat at any time. We'll address as many as we can after the presentation, but all of them will go into the Q&A doc and have a response. And with that, I will turn it over to Ashley, and I will stop sharing. Ashley, you have slides to share?
Okay, Linda, can you hear us now?
We can, thank you.
Okay. I was so worried there for a second. All right, yeah, Sue is going to share the slides. This is Ashley Chappell with NOAA. Thank you for that introduction, Linda. I'm actually in the same room for once with my key partners on this study, Allison and Sue, which is pretty exciting. And we have Ian Todd with us as well, who did so much of the hidden behind-the-scenes work on this study. So 3D Nation Elevation Requirements and Benefits Study, we're going to run through it. I'm going to give you a little bit of background just to level set everybody on where we are. And then Allison and Sue, smarter than me on this, are going to get into the sort of the nuts and bolts of things. So are we ready to go?
Absolutely.
Okay, great. So I don't know exactly the background, of course, of everyone who is on this webinar, but I'm betting that some of you.
Are you sharing slides?
Yes. Can you see them?
Apparently not.
No.
Zoom.
Zoom's a little funny. You have to hit share after you select the item. That gets a lot of folks. I know you guys are Teams people.
Where did it go? Where did it go? Is it the green box?
You might have to click. There you go.
Do the arrow on the right. Yeah, and then. I think it's still on below.
Okay, now are you seeing?
Now?
It looks like something's coming on, and we will let you know when it's here.
Okay.
Thank you.
Hopefully it's our title slide.
I'm not seeing anything yet. So
Meeting.
did you select it and then also follow up with the, oh, it's coming up.
Okay, awesome. All right, well, hopefully the slides will transition more quickly. Otherwise, I'll have to fill the airtime with some thoughts.
There you are.
Okay, great. What I was starting to say was that some of you on the call may have been involved actually probably 2 years before that, 12 years ago, the National Enhanced Elevation Assessment, which was a requirements benefits study that the USGS conducted with Dewberry's help to look at stakeholder requirements for terrestrial elevation data. Resulted in over 600 activities and $1.2 billion in annual benefits from really good elevation data. And it led to some recommendations for what is now the 3DEP program and the program and all the activities that you all may be involved in as well through the broad area announcement that the 3DEP puts out and other things that program does. So a few years ago, I was looking at this, my interagency working group on ocean and coastal mapping, which is focused on, believe it or not, ocean and coastal mapping, was looking at the 3DEP program and the NEA study and thinking, you know, it would be lovely to have something like that for our coasts and oceans. Something that we could look at that captured requirements, that talked about benefits, and that ultimately could give us what USGS used to develop 3DEP, those program scenarios that look at different alternatives for how to meet requirements for bathymetry, essentially water depths and elevation in our coasts and oceans. And happily, my good friends at USGS were looking at the 3DEP program and thinking that they were getting really close to needing to do a reassessment to check in on what the 3DEP program had accomplished to that point and where it should go next. And so it was like a marriage made in heaven. We put our resources together. We got started on the 3D Nation Elevation Requirements and Benefits Study using the sort of foundation laid by the NEA study. And we moved on into a bold future. If you go to the next slide for me, Sue. Oh, looking at my screen too, it's in advance. We moved on into the 3D Nation study. And, it's more recent, obviously, and I hope that some of you on the webinar have participated in this. In fact, I hope that most all of you participated in this. And our goals for this study were to understand not just onshore terrestrial requirements for elevation data, but also the nearshore, the offshore bathymetric requirements and inland bathymetric requirements, which was really new for everybody. And what was really important about this study was that we wanted to see how these things dovetailed, particularly in the coastal zone, how they fit together, how seamless data in that zone could benefit stakeholders across the nation. And the results of the study were intended, just like the NEA study, to help us understand requirements and plan for the next generation of ocean and coastal mapping and the 3DEP program after its completion. And so you may remember, if you participated, that we were really careful not to get hung up on technologies and how this data could be acquired. We really just wanted to talk with you all about what you needed, what elevation data you needed, and what your requirements for it were. And so this graphic is just, you may remember it, it's one of our favorites. It's just to illustrate that, there are no real solid lines between offshore and nearshore. There's not a solid line between nearshore and the beach and on up onto dry land. These things all blur together, and so that was one of the key features of the study, was understanding that kind of element. So next slide, Allison.
So my turn, Allison, so you can get used to my voice. There's a couple terms that we were using in the study that we just wanted to make sure everyone was familiar with, because you're going to hear them repeated throughout the next hour and a half of us talking. And so, the definitions of 3D elevation data, that they're 3D measurements of either the underwater depths and topography in the case of bathymetric data, or of the terrestrial terrain in the case of topographic data. We asked people what they were doing with elevation data, and we call that a mission critical activity, or an MCA. So it's an activity that uses elevation data to do something, and that something should be mission critical, indispensable, essential, helps make the organization run, part of the core mission of an organization to do a thing. And that activity, we hope, is accomplishing a business use, which is the ultimate use of services and products from an activity to do something. We have some examples of that. One would be dam break modeling and inundation mapping. That would be aligned with the flood risk management business use. Another example is commercial shipping, which was, for most people, aligned with the marine and riverine navigation and safety business use. So we had about 30 different business uses in the study, so everyone's activity would be aligned. And then the other thing I wanted to point out, for those of you, I don't know what number we're at, but for all those who haven't read the study, for every mission critical activity, there is an entry in the appendice for that activity with information about what they provided, and they go along with maps to show where people had an interest in collecting data for that activity.
And we did ask everybody to give us their geospatial area of interest so that we could do that mapping.
And so you heard Ashley talk about the different types of geographies we're interested in. We've been calling these geography types. So we had inland topography, so that's what's being collected on the land, pretty much inland of the mean low water line, but not always. We had inland bathymetry, so collecting data on the bottoms of lakes, reservoirs, rivers. Both of these could include the tops of things. So from an inland topography point of view, tops of trees, sub-canopies, tops of buildings, underwater, different submerged object types, but we separated vegetation from structures. And then as Ashley mentioned, there's really no official boundary between any of this stuff. Elevation really doesn't care how we want to classify it. And so for nearshore bathymetry, the study typically thought of it as the coastal areas from about 10 meters of depth inland to the terrestrial component. And offshore was pretty much from 10 meters to 60 meters out. Anything you wanted to add, Ashley, about the offshore definition? Okay.
It goes out to the EEZ.
Thank you, Sue.
Oh, yeah, thanks.
And then the other thing I wanted to point out, because people were asked to define where they needed to have the different kinds of data to do their mission critical activity, sometimes people only wanted inland topography, sometimes they wanted combinations. Pretty much every combination under the sun was provided by someone. So when we're looking at results throughout the day, you're going to see this box in the corner of the graphics to let us know when we're looking at all of the geographies responding or just one individual geography or a combination thereof. So there's going to be a little key in the corner. And so quickly, and then I'm going to pass it over to Sue, I think, just to give you a little overview of the kinds of things the study asked about. Obviously, we were focused on people's needs for 3D elevation data. I think that was clear from the title of the study, at least I hope it was. And as Sue mentioned, we are interested in where people are doing their activity, and then what kind of elevation data is needed to perform that activity. Things like how frequently do you need the data? What kind of accuracy do you need the data to have? What do you need going on at the beach? What kind of hydrologic processing do you need? Do you need tidal correction? Do you want the data between your project and another type of data to be seamless so you don't notice the difference between them at all when you're working with it? What kind of products do you need? Do you need the data integrated with other data sets? And if you were to get these things that you're asking for, what kind of benefits would you get for having that doing your activity? And we broke it out into operational benefits, things like savings to time or improvement in a mission being done properly, through to what a customer could get, customer service benefits, like I'm able to respond more quickly to people and get their permit done faster, that kind of thing. They also asked some questions about societal benefits, but we weren't turning those into any kind of dollar benefit, so we don't have much on that today, but it is something we hope to look into more as we do more work on the study.
Okay, so we got 1,352 mission critical activities from 45 federal agencies, 56 state and territorial governments that included 99 local and 8 tribal governments, 10 non-governmental organizations, 14 that were academia that had nationwide requirements, as in addition to some additional academic institutions that really just had a state-only requirement that were included with the state, and 34 private companies. And as Allison mentioned, the data were binned into the 30 different business uses and the 4 different geography types. And this map just shows, you know, as we collected those areas of interest, how they all stack up on top of each other, those on land and out in the water. People were allowed to select multiple geographies for their mission critical activity. So as Allison mentioned, some people said they just needed inland topo, but many said they needed inland topo and something else. And there were a number of folks who said they just needed the bathymetry, either near shore or near shore and offshore.
Team 3D Nation, we no longer have you on audio. So I'm hoping you can hear us. I see that you're talking and moving your screen, but we have no audio. Emily, I'm not able to locate the phone number they were calling in from in the presentation. Oh, Sue's coming back in. I see they're coming back in.
Okay, good. Yeah, I also saw the phone number disappear and was like, oh.
This technology is so great. I've got chat boxes coming up where everybody's saying I messaged them and
Technology is great when it works.
Sorry about losing the audio there. So picking back up, this is a question we asked about the average size of—
Sue, you're going to need to go. So you're going to need to go back a slide. We lost you when you went to the previous slide. Yeah, at the beginning of that is when we lost you.
Okay, sorry.
Nope. Glad you're here.
So we asked about how important it was for folks to be able to pick out bare earth or tops of buildings or vegetation, tops of submerged features, subcanopy, river and lake bottoms, near shore bottom, ocean and sea bottom, or even the sea surface. And across all the geographies, this is what we heard, bare earth ground having the, the highest number of requirements, but also, a number of the other sort of bottoms of things, much less for the tops of things. And then just looking at offshore bathymetry, of course, the river lake bottoms, near shore and ocean sea bottoms, those things rose up considerably over all the responses. And another technology agnostic question was, how big a feature do you need to be able to pick out of your elevation data? So most folks were trying to work at, relatively small features that they needed to be able to discern. And they were working with relatively small geographic extent on a day-to-day basis, not nationwide analyses on a regular basis. Now a look at the quality level and update frequency requirements for inland topo. We saw quality level 2 had the highest number of responses, but more than half of the folks said that they need a quality level that's higher than the existing quality level 2 that's being collected for the 3-DEP program. So that tells us that, there is a big need to go beyond that. And essentially across the board, 4 to 5 years was the most frequently requested update frequency, but 75% of the folks said they needed something between 2 and 5 years in terms of update frequency. Inland bathymetry, quality level 0B was the most frequently requested. And again, 4 to 5 years was the most frequently requested update frequency. Nearshore bathymetry, quality level 0B again was the most frequently requested, and 4 to 5 year update frequency. And offshore bathymetry had sort of a bigger mix of requirements, both for quality level and update frequency, but almost half of the folks said they need an order 1 or 1A or 1B in terms of quality level, which is a multi-beam echo sounder sort of standard data acquisition. We also asked folks how important each of these different components is to their mission critical activity accomplishments. And we were sort of surprised. We thought that vertical accuracy would be the most important, but they said that update frequency was the most important. And that geographic extent coverage was the least important, which also was a little surprising. We did see a lot of variations in the requirements across the different business uses. So this is just one example for inland topo, where across all of the mission critical activities, quality level 2 was most frequently requested, but only at 36%. But if you looked at just business use 15 for flood risk management, it jumped up to 65%, which kind of makes sense because that's sort of the minimum requirement that FEMA has set for doing their floodplain maps, and for doing the H&H models that support them. And quality level 2 was most frequently requested for water supply and quality business use. But infrastructure and construction management, for instance, needed quality level 0 HD. And again, that makes sense because they're trying to look at elevation data for culvert design and bridge design, and they need something way more, super accurate for doing that. Here's another look at the top 10 business uses and flood risk management across the board for all of the mission critical activities. Flood risk management had the most number, followed by infrastructure and construction management, water supply and quality, urban and regional planning, and coastal zone management. But if you split it out by inland topo, that's pretty much the same or similar order. Inland bathymetry, wildlife and habitat management came up, and coastal zone management came up higher. Nearshore bathymetry, so you're seeing coastal zone management, marine and riverine navigation and safety coming up to the top, and flood kind of going down a little bit in importance. And offshore bathymetry, same thing, coastal zone management, marine and riverine navigation and safety rose to the top in terms of the most frequently chosen business uses. For inland bathymetry, we asked folks what is the most important thing that they needed to have in inland bathymetry for. So for the river width, kind of fell in the, not the smallest rivers, but in that sort of middle range, 50 to 2,500 feet wide rivers. And water bodies, generally the larger water bodies, were more important for folks to have inland bathymetry for. And we asked a whole series of questions about data seamlessness. And the series included how important is it for the data to be seamless within your data type, so within inland topography, within inland bathymetry, within each of those geography types, and also how important is it to be between them. So how important is it for your inland topo to match up to your nearshore bathymetry at that shoreline interface. And we asked about the seamlessness of different types of data products, DEMs being the most important. And we asked about whether it was most important for the entire data to be seamless, and also whether seasonality was important to it. That's a hard word to say. So this is across all of the geography types. And then if you look at inland topo, inland bathymetry, nearshore bathymetry, and offshore bathymetry, so seamlessness seems to increase, the importance of seamlessness seems to increase as you kind of move through that spectrum of geography types. Now we're starting to look at the dollar benefits. So as we said, we did ask for folks to tell us what kinds of dollar benefits they would likely receive if their data requirements were met. We saw a total of $13.5 billion in future annual benefits, and broken out by organization type, most from the state responses, and then followed by the federal, and a pretty small proportion from the non-governmental entities, and broken out by geography type, almost 10 billion for inland topography, 2.5 billion for nearshore bathymetry, almost $1 billion for inland bathymetry, and offshore bathymetry was much lower than we thought it should be. And we have some further thoughts on that we'll talk about in a minute or two. This is another way to look at dollar benefits by organization and geography type. So here it is just in a straight table. Here it is sort of a flow between the organization type on the left and the geography type on the right. And part of the reason that we're showing you this is because we're going to be asking you all some questions about how you would find it most helpful to see some of these requirements and benefits illustrated, symbolized, visualized, and how you might want to be working with some of this information to support your state programs. Here's another look at dollar benefits by business use. And interestingly, coastal zone management had the most dollar benefits, followed by homeland security, flood risk, infrastructure and construction, and geology. As I mentioned, we do think that the benefits are likely to have been underestimated for a number of reasons. One is that we think that folks were hesitant, and they told us this as we were doing our validation, because we went back and spoke to everyone who responded to our online questionnaire. We went back and talked to them at least once and sometimes multiple times. Folks were somewhat hesitant to estimate benefits from the data that they hadn't worked with a lot. And it's recognized that the inland topography data are better known and are understood than bathymetry, and that particularly for inland bathymetry, folks don't have a lot of that to work with at all. We also think that we were missing input from, we know we were missing input from smaller private firms and individual users. And we were sad that we didn't get as much response from some of the key industries that we were hoping to get responses from. We didn't get much from, commercial timber and precision agriculture, only a little bit from the, aquaculture community, wind energy, oil and gas. The oil and gas companies are I think, notoriously hesitant to provide as much that they could consider to be competitive advantages. The motor vehicle manufacturers, we were surprised. We know that all the autonomous vehicle and EV charging station, locating and that sort of thing, they all rely on elevation information. Shipping, boating, fishing, cruise lines, ports and harbor managers, they were underrepresented, although we did have some representation. And telecom, that's another area where, there should be a good need for elevation data, and we didn't hear a lot from them.
Not that we didn't try.
You're right. So, working with all of that requirements information and the benefits information, we did a series of geospatial benefit cost analyses. So, as I said before, we had all of our areas of interest stacked up on top of each other. And then we overlaid that with a 1 kilometer by 1 kilometer grid and calculated requirements, benefits, costs per grid cell. And then we also did a thing called reduced value multipliers, where we said, okay, well, if you told us that you would get $1 million in benefits from having quality level 1 data at a 2 to 3 year update frequency, and we're only analyzing a scenario that gives you quality level 2 at a 4 to 5 year update frequency, you're not getting everything that you asked for, so your benefits are reduced somewhat because you're not getting everything that you asked for. So we did that and ran scenarios for pretty much all the combinations of quality level and update frequency, along with a number of mixed quality level and update frequency scenarios. And USGS and NOAA are going to be working with those data more to sort of build out what might be viable program scenarios moving forward. What else could be done? So this is another question that we're going to be asking you to provide some input on. How else could we potentially get some additional input on benefits in areas where we think that we the information is underrepresented? Some things that we've thought about, we could do individual outreach to additional private sector representatives. We could include cost avoidance in the benefit calculations potentially, although that's a little bit iffy. But basically considering that if a federal agency is covering the cost of data acquisition and the product creation, folks don't have to do that, how much cost is avoided in that process. See if we could maybe come up with a way to quantify major benefits. We did ask, in addition to asking for dollar benefits, we asked folks to say if their benefits were major, moderate, minor, or none. We got a lot of major responses where people weren't able to quantify those benefits. If we could come up with some sort of average major benefit value, maybe we could use that as a proxy. And we know that there's a whole lot of other evaluation studies and tools that are out there that, look at, the estimated value of the U.S. marine economy, for instance, $132 billion in wages and $307 billion in GDP. How much of that, if somebody could estimate how much of that depends on elevation data, then we could say, well, that percentage of those, that economy is coming from having elevation data. So what's next for the study?
My turn again. So this used to say publish the report, which is coming soon, and yay, we get to say publish September 2022. I think this is the first presentation where we get to say it's actually published. There's an easy to remember link by going to usgs.gov/3dep/3D Nation study, and that'll take you to a landing page that'll take you to the report. We're also, I don't have it on here, but we're also working on some, I would even think to just call it the ArcGIS Hub, but we're trying to work on another site to help bring some of the information from the study report out. More interactive. Make it more interactive, a little bit easier to get at besides reading 14,000 pages, which I must confess, I probably read maybe 10,000 of those 14,000 pages myself. And that's part of the reason we wanted to talk to you guys today, with some back and forth feedback on making sure we prioritize the types of views into the data people want to see. As Sue mentioned, we're going to be looking at the program scenarios that are in the study and maybe some additional ones, and determine the future program directions. And then from USGS's point of view, many have probably heard about this and are aware of the one that was done for hydrography, but we're going to be working on a 3D national topography model call for action for the next generation of 3DEP, and we hope to finish that by the end of FY23 if possible. And so to further this theme of looking at the data in different ways, you hopefully noticed that we were providing results throughout this presentation from many different geographies to kind of make the point that depending on how you look at the information, you get very different results. Another place where that happens is in the organization type. So we asked federal government to respond on behalf of the agency, and we asked states to respond on behalf of their state. And so those answers are in separate appendices, and it makes it difficult to look across. So a good example across the top, if a state wanted the entire state of Vermont, but a federal agency only wanted a portion of Vermont, and then someone else wanted all of the state of Vermont, at the end of the day, it would look more like the map on the right of two different components of need going on in that state. And right now, the way the information is structured in the report, it's not easy to tease that out. If someone asks, what does Vermont need, then if you look just in the state appendix, you only get what the state respondent said, and you'd have to kind of skim the rest to figure it out. So one of the tools we're hoping to make is something that will make looking across these different response types easier for folks. And so what we'd like to hear from you today, I think we're going to have a series of interactive jam boards that Linda will kick off for us in a few moments. But how do you envision using the results from the 3D Nation study? What do you think you might want to do with it? How best could the results from the study be queried and displayed, things like by the business uses, by the level of government, like federal, tribal, state, that kind of thing, by the type of the geographic area, so the inland topography areas, the inland bathy areas, where people want nearshore bathy and offshore bathy, or some different combinations of those, by geography, such as I just mentioned, the state or a region like the Southeast, a user-defined area of interest. Are you more interested in maps or charts and graphs or a combination? And another question about how can we gather more information to speak to what might be missing in the benefits.
And then just to be thinking about this, what you're looking at are prioritization surveys that we've conducted with the help of our friends in these regions. So the Florida Coastal Mapping Program did a prioritization survey there on the left, and in Alaska, we conducted a survey, actually a couple over in the last couple of years with key stakeholders in the region to prioritize sort of at a high, medium, and low areas in the water at the coast and in the water are priority areas for mapping. And I'm sort of using this as a podium to preach and ask if this can be done in any state, inland or at the coast, and it can be done on land too. These studies use the 3-depth grid as the basis, and which helps as we compare results. And so I'm asking, taking advantage of this webinar to ask if doing this across your state, inland and offshore, would be of interest, and if so, just to reach out to me. We could talk about it, talk about how these prioritization surveys work, and that sort of thing. Because what we're doing with these coastal prioritization surveys is layering them in with our 3D Nation results to get some compiled answers there too, on the cost of collecting data, perhaps, or the benefit in collecting data by stakeholder priorities, rather than other approaches. So looking at different scenarios that way too. So thanks for giving me that moment.
And that's pretty much what we had in terms of a presentation. So if we want to just go ahead and I want to take questions now or jump to the Jamboard and take questions at the very, very end.
Whatever. I don't know if you had a plan, Linda, about questions.
Yeah, we're going to get fancy here. We are going to move to the Jamboard and take questions and do a couple of, we only had a couple of questions. So I'm going to share the Jamboard link. I'm going to take back sharing. Can you guys see my screen okay?
Not yet.
Let me try. Oh, because I didn't hit the share button like I told you all 6 times. And I put the link in the screen. And while we're making that transition over, just a couple of quick questions. We had a question from Steve Fugate as to when the survey took place and how did you determine who to include?
The online survey went up in 2018 and was up for about a year. Started in like June of 2018 and went until early 2019.
I can speak to the who we asked. So we used a structure in the original National Enhanced Elevation Assessment of identifying points of contact in each agency, and each federal agency, thank you. And we called them state champions in each state, where we reached out to these champions and asked them who would best represent your state to make sure, or their agencies, to make sure we had broad reach. The other reason we did that was because we found in NEA when people responded, we would share back those responses to these points of contact. There would be recognition that maybe one of the activities was important to an individual, but didn't really represent the mission of the whole program or agency or an entire state. Sometimes an academic was responding on behalf of the state and they were asking for the whole country, or someone asked for the whole globe. We actually had that. And it gave the point of contact an opportunity to see what the people in their agency or state or organization were doing and responding with, and would allow them to consolidate 2 different responses that really belong together and that kind of thing. And it also provided them a chance to add in activities that they thought were missing from the folks who responded on their behalf. So that's the way we selected who would respond to the study.
So we did learn there's a slight drawback in structuring it that way. Once, we're looking at really big geographies, right? We've added inland bathymetry, nearshore, and offshore to this equation, a little bit different than the NEA study. And so we did learn, lesson learned, was that, one state point of contact, one state champion, actually may also not know everybody in their state who should be invited, should be asked. So if, let's say that the champion was the state GIO, but that person is very terrestrial focused. that in some ways explained in some states why, there wasn't a larger coastal and offshore set of inputs. And so, it's not that that's wrong. We got great responses from the respondents that we did get, but we realized that it might be a limitation and are going to think about that going forward.
Yeah.
Okay, since
Agree
we're
with
doing
that.
pretty well on time, I'm going to go ahead and ask you, can you explain the HD specification associated with the different QLs, just a quick primer, or would you just like to follow up in the Q&A with a more detailed response?
We can provide more detail, but the gist of it is around the time we were developing the questions of the study, there was a lot more interest in collecting data using things like single photon and Geiger mode, where a lot more points per meter were being shot by sensors. And we wanted folks to have a way to indicate if they had an interest in those higher density types of products. And so those two just have a different, I don't have it memorized, amount of points. I think it's 20 points versus 8 points, if I'm remembering.
Something like that, yeah.
Close, but we can get a more detailed answer in the Q&A.
Okay, great. And then let's just go ahead. Nathan from California wants to ask, with the frequency of update being more important than vertical accuracy, was there any comparison between frequency of update and density?
Not yet. That's a good question. I haven't compared those two yet. The way I was taking the update frequency, I was imagining myself being in someone's shoes, and if I had a business process that was done by hand or by people going in the field that I'm now replacing with LiDAR, it's a lot harder to go back to doing that in the field than the areas maybe I haven't transitioned yet, and maybe that's why people were interested in, once I have LiDAR data somewhere, I really want it there again, versus, I already have a way of doing business in a location. I can keep doing it that way, but now that I've transitioned to this other location, I need the LiDAR to be updated more frequently. That was just one thought I had as to why some of that might have been going on.
Okay, great. And then another question is, for at least topographic data, is there any way to tease out the importance of other collection characteristics such as side lap?
We actually didn't ask a specific question about side lap. We asked questions about vegetation. I just realized after Sue went through that we forgot to put in a couple of the charts we have that talk about data integrations and data products, but every one of these geographies, inland topo, inland bathy, nearshore, and offshore bathy, all got asked questions about the kinds of data products that they needed, and there was a lot of interest in inland topo for aerial imagery, and inland surface water bridging culverts. When I saw how much you were talking about bridging culverts there, Linda, I was like, I can't believe I didn't put that chart in the slide deck. There was a good bit of interest in that as well. But mostly we have to look at how people are interested in the vegetation structure. The questions we asked about the understory and the mid canopy, as well as the tops of vegetation, and maybe we could see something out from that to help. We did notice a change when you look at that technology agnostic graph. That was one of the first graphs in the whole presentation, and we switched it from all geographies to offshore bathy. I've also done looks where I've switched on and off different business uses, and for business uses like natural resources conservation, you see the interest right now. If you look at it, it's like 30% interest in the tops of vegetation, but if you look at just what natural resources wants, it jumps up to 90-something%. So you are seeing those kinds of differences. And we could probably tease some more stuff out about that if it would help with understanding where people might want side lap.
All right, so I think that we should maybe move on to the Jamboard. And so I hope folks are in there. For those of you that should be on slide 1. If you haven't navigated, you'll see here at the top, we've got our navigation bar. If you'd like to add, we're asking you at this stage to use a sticky note. So you simply click over here and add your note, and it'll show up. So, and then whatever. So please, the question, let the team present the question.
So first question we're interested in understanding is, to whom and how do you envision promoting the 3D Nation study results? You know, who in your state is interested in you know, getting more information about the study?
So please add your comments here. We'll give you a couple minutes.
And I would just add that, remember, the reason for asking these is to give USGS more information about how they can provide good visualizations for you with these efforts.
And NOAA.
And no.
Yeah, I know, sorry. Sorry.
All right, okay, great. So I'll put the Jamboard link in again in case it got lost, because wouldn't want anybody to get lost. Come on in, the water's fine, folks. And I spent a lot of time on these, so dang it, no.
And I would just add, just to fill the space, that, you know, again, if you think about whether you're going to be presenting this to people who know and understand LiDAR, or if you're going to be presenting it to more lay people who don't have the technical background, I think that plays a part in how the data are repackaged and visualized.
Right. All right, we're going to leave the, let's go on to the, so do you guys want to revisit some of these, what you're seeing here?
Well, and they can just keep adding their sticky notes. They have the link. They can just keep adding things as
Right.
they.
So would you like to go on to the next one?
Yeah, just one sec though. You know, while all people are thinking about this question in particular, as you look at the data, and you know, I'm looking at the sticky by about the Washington State LiDAR stakeholder meeting next week. You know, as you're looking at what you can extract now from this study for your particular state, if you see things that maybe don't sit right, or that you have a question about, or that you know you want to maybe suggest or flag that doesn't seem right, just reach out to us. We can hang on to these comments and thoughts to help us improve the design of our next iteration of this. Because we're looking for those things. You know, how can we do this better?
Okay. All right, so ready to go on to the next one? And again, this will stay open. You can come back and add your comments. And again, back to the team. I'll let you present the question.
So what kinds of questions do you and potentially your stakeholders have, and about either the study results in terms of requirements or benefits?
I know this is an inquisitive bunch. There we go. So to kind of lead you off for the next few questions, we're going through the who, what, when, where, how, why. So this is the what, and I think the next one is the
Where?
the how, and then the where. So you get to vote on some of these questions that are already in there. That's good.
And it's just some really good responses coming in.
Mm-hmm.
So again, I let the team review what they want and let me know when they want to move forward.
I just have to say, after all the time it took to make that 1 kilometer grid, I'm really glad someone wants it. I just don't know how to share it. It's kind of big. It's like includes out to the EEZ and like the territories and things, but we'll see about getting that.
If I might throw in, that 1 kilometer grid might be a great thing to go into a dashboarding type of tool to let people select out and query the pieces they want.
Yeah, I think that's one of the things we were hoping when we made it, was that it would help unite the water and the land and all the different activities for folks. The NEA study, when we asked questions, we asked on a grid, and people were forced to pick the grid cell that they wanted. And this time around, folks gave us their AOI, but then we converted it to a grid to be able to use it both ways.
And
More
that's
flexibility.
That's the same grid that's being used for the prioritization surveys too, isn't it, Ashley? For the
Yeah.
coastal and coastal and ocean.
Yeah. And for any 3-deppers around, it was built off the original 3-dep grid that's now sort of defunct, but it's only used occasionally. But it was all designed to reconnect back together.
Should we move on to the next one?
Certainly. So this one's a little tricky. You got to use a different box this time. You got to come down here and use a text box. You vote for one, create a text box, and just add your organization acronym under which of these you would be best suit your needs. Or you can add, and you can add a sticky note over here. We got fancy on you.
And I think they can certainly vote
And
on.
I'm sorry,
yeah,
what?
more than one, absolutely.
Oh, okay, more than one.
So again, the idea here is going back to that first question on the previous one. Would you want us to be able to group together benefits by business use? Or would it be helpful for someone to come in and say, I am an engineer and I want to know the benefits for my occupation? Or if I'm in the private sector, I want to know what are the benefits for that specific subsector, the private sector, the federal, and so on. Does that make sense? If it doesn't, please speak up. So in other words, what do you vote for that would be helpful for you and your stakeholders to have outcomes summarized in those groupings? Well, that's not helpful.
Post-it. We agree with the unhelpful post-it, but part of the reason we're asking is there's so many different ways to look at this. We need to figure out where to start, and we want to start where we think it's going to be the most useful for folks. So,
Yeah, and as you can see through our slides, we did charts and graphs in a whole pile of different ways and slicing and dicing the same data in multiple ways. And there's an almost infinite number of combinations and permutations of that could be done.
I think while people are filling this stuff in, one of the more complicated things in the study to work with the results is this asking the feds to answer separately from the state, separately from the privates, with very good reason, but the fact that you can't just easily ask across all of them without us doing some work. When you look at the study results, I think we had a bullet on the previous slide where someone was saying they just plan to take snippets out of the state appendix that applies to their state. And that's great, but then you're missing what anybody else that wasn't a state government or a local government person said about their needs in your state. And they're also users of data in your state. So that's why we want to make something that will make it easier to cross all that. Don't have a time frame for when that will be done, hopefully in a couple months, within a couple months. But that's why, because it's going to take time to build some of these tools, we want to make sure we build the most popular one. And I have my leading candidate, which is to make sure we can cross state lines with the results, so that when someone's saying, I want to see what happened in state X, they're getting what everybody said and not just what the state government said. These are good ideas of occupations. I think that blue posted is exactly what we're trying to do, making it more scalable so people can self-serve.
Yeah, and that gets to a question that Allison raised in our planning was, is it more beneficial for you to have static pre-canned results, or do you want it to be more interactive so that you can ask for what you want for that specific stakeholder group or set of questions and return customized results?
Nathan, why does California keep leaving? You're there and then you leave.
Well, because I think I thought I was misinterpreting. I was just throwing that whether California would be interested in having it broken down by business use
No,
or
yeah, but
by
you're
discipline and occupation. And the answer to pretty much all of those is a kind of a global yes. I can see benefits for having it broken down by pretty much every one of the dimensions in the data that you've got listed here.
well, that's fine. Go ahead and put yourself in there. I liked you in there.
Again, like Allison was saying, we're trying to gauge what is the most important, where to start efforts first, where to focus our efforts.
I'm seeing a lot of mentions of breakouts by business use, I think on the previous board and this one, where people are interested in being able to identify like the top 10 of things, understanding where the most uses are. Sounds like makes sense to me.
So I will let the team reorganize these as they see fit. Shift them around as they see fit. All right, should we go on to the next one?
Yeah.
I'll let you guys introduce this.
So again, this has kind of been discussed, but how is it most beneficial to show the results by geographic extent? Is it specifically by a state? Is it better to do it, to show it regionally, by the geographic type, or your own user-defined AOI? Or is it better to have standalone charts and graphs that may or may not correlate with a map? And so again, the idea is to use a text box and enter your state as like a voting mechanism, and you're not limited to one. So which types of geographic extents are most useful for you?
I'm shocked that people from district care about state visualizations. I just not expecting that. My born in Jersey sarcasm come across?
Now they are, they are very interested in working across boundaries and watersheds as well, so they know that it doesn't stop at the state line. But they have certain legislative obligations, right?
Yep. Nature of the beast, right? Oh, eco reason. I don't think I thought of that one. Good one.
Well, we didn't put in Huck either, but
Add it under other, sure.
yeah. Can we go to the US Virgin Islands to see what their hydrography is like?
Sure, it's hurricane season. Go on.
Two votes for watersheds is interesting. Wonder what size people are interested in. If you put watershed, could you share that size you're interested in? I have 3 water-related ones. I'm just curious how big or small.
Yeah, if whoever entered the watershed value, feel free to come off of mute.
Same with the Hucks.
Yeah.
That's
2,
that-
Huck
that's
4,
me
Huck
again.
12.
That's California again, causing trouble on the watersheds. We do a lot of stuff by various watershed scales.
Okay.
Nathan, you're free to go by your anonymous lemur if you'd like to.
Well, it's interesting that it assigns that even though I'm signed in with a
I know.
email account.
Does anybody have thoughts about maps versus charts and graphs? I think some of these things in my mind would be charts and graphs, even though they're broken down by some of these regions. Not everything can be represented on a map. Like some of those complicated, required, nice to have
Yeah.
charts. I'm thinking if someone could pick the type they want, like I want to see this chart for all of California, or I want to see this chart for whatever they're picking. But I'm kind of interested in what people were thinking they might want to see on a map.
Hi, everybody.
Yeah, and
This
you
is
know, as we did our,
hello. This is
Good.
Vermont. We got. Can you guys hear me?
Yes.
Yep.
Great. Back to the boundaries, like the Hucks versus the state for these. Oftentimes we're run into the situation where we need to choose between administrative boundaries or geographic boundaries like that, and some administrative boundaries change. I'm not saying the state boundaries are going to change necessarily, but I would generally like to see a move towards watershed boundaries that relatively remain static over time. So I'm curious if the watershed boundaries even align with state boundaries in most cases, and what kind of problems that would create if you make a decision to do one or the other, and how you can actually do both.
Well, we have every mission critical activities area of interest, so they can get racked and stacked back up in different ways. How that will work on an online tool will be something for experts to try and work out how to make that more user friendly. But there's not alignment in a lot of places between watersheds and state boundaries. I mean, there are occasional places where boundaries between states are based on rivers and the like, but often that doesn't work with watersheds. Rivers are usually in the middle of the watershed.
right. And even the watershed boundaries are changing as the data get aligned to the LiDAR data, we're seeing the watershed boundaries get better refined.
But at some point, we'll probably, if it seems like there's enough interest in doing some things by watershed that we might have to take a moment in time of a set of the hucks and use that to.
Yeah.
And then if it changes enough that someone wants to look it up again, they could maybe, if we can figure out how to do something like a user-defined DOI, that they would be able to.
All right, ready to move on?
But just,
Yes.
here. And this is, just a question of, if you have any thoughts on ways that we could, do a better job of addressing the missing benefits, ways to reach out to additional folks or, mine other existing information to address what we perceive as still a gap in some of our benefits collection.
Ladies, can you address how those missing benefits affect like the next gen study? How that lack of information is affecting things going forward?
From an inland topo point, so next for us at USGS, next generation 3DEP includes inland topography and inland bathymetry specifically, recognizing crossover with the coast, crossover with inland bathy between jurisdictions and the like. The fact that the inland bathymetry benefits are lower than we think they should be. I'm gonna get here. Noah's gonna have a chance we do see it impacting us when we were looking at program scenarios, because we want to, as government programs, we have a requirement to look at the cost effectiveness of what we do. We do see that we're having to adjust what we thought our program would probably have looked like to something slightly different. I can't get into much more detail because nothing's been selected, but we are seeing it impact how we think we're going to phase in approaches to collecting stuff in that inland bathymetry environment. Ash, what are you seeing? What you're looking at NOAA?
Yeah, pretty much the same. I mean, we really, like Sue said, I think we missed, just could not reach or get input from key sectors, especially in offshore and deep ocean, which isn't necessarily a responsibility of a state to share information with us, but I think in that particular geography we really need private sector input, offshore wind, other renewables, even like Stu also said, the fossil fuel group.
There's offshore minerals that seem to be of interest to folks, and aquaculture,
and I think despite some really solid effort, we just didn't get that input, but we know it should be there. So we've got those kinds of hurdles we need to think about dealing with.
And I would just point out to Nate's point in the chat, he asked, it's going to be hard given the effort that's already put into it. And that's why we wanted to pick your brains about how we could do it as painlessly as possible. So how can we continue to document those benefits without sending out another big survey? And
well, I think that's one happy state of affairs, which is that I think, this is my personal opinion, I think we got such a nice solid foundation of requirements, and we're going to have to go to order 00 if we do any better than what people have already said they needed. So we really have a good kind of platform to start from the next time around, and we can, I think, make this whole effort a lot shorter. Instead of asking people what they need, we could have people verify that they need this. sort of put things in front of them to just check against rather than have to think through from scratch what it is they need.
Yeah. So, and to address the workload part of this, we know it was really big and it was a huge lesson learned for us. It's a good thing and a bad thing. If we had known that there was going to be this much interest in data across all of the geographies, we would never have structured the study the way we did. So it tells us that there really is a need, such a strong need to make sure what we do across inland topography and bathymetry is coordinated. Huge takeaway from the study, I think.
And Karen, is there actually, let me check, is there no, there's not actually. I thought that was the last one.
Yeah.
Well, all right, well, we do have a few minutes left. If you have any additional questions for the speakers, first we'll leave this Google, the Jamboard open. If you have additional questions for the speakers, now would be a great time. If you would, please enter them into chat so I can capture them.
Eric Jesperson had a question.
Yeah, I clarified with Eric
Okay.
what we were talking about, so.
Okay.
Well, if you do have a question, go ahead and throw it in there. I am going to go to our final slide then.
Oh, hold on one sec. Did you want
Okay.
to give your email address? Folks who are interested in doing a prioritization.
Oh, yeah, the priority, please. Yeah. So, Linda, if you wouldn't mind sharing, you have it, but you can throw it in the chat and email it out. But it's ashley.chappell@noaa.gov. Two L's, 2 A's in NOAA.
You want me to throw it into the chat? Okay, hold on. I'm going to copy paste it. I don't.
You can do it too. Yeah, thank you. I'm not sitting in front of
I gotcha.
computer. Sorry.
So again, Ashley is asking for you, if you have, again, state your question, Ashley.
Well, the last slide in the presentation showed some examples of coastal and ocean prioritization surveys, and the process we use can be done, terrestrially too. So in my ideal perfect world, Linda and Phil, you'll remember that I would love to get states doing these surveys for their entire interior of the state and then off into state and offshore, so that we have one sort of seamless view of a state's mapping priorities. Again, technology agnostic, right? That problem of what collects what type of data can be solved later, but it would be, I think, wonderful to have a consistent approach to how we identify mapping priorities in each state by state, and then look at it, nationwide. If I were to stand on my soapbox like I'm doing right this second, that's what I would really love to see. And we can assist with doing those, with running those, and I can talk to anybody about, how the process is done, how we can support it. It's really quite, I think, simple once you get going. And you end up with some really good data, that tells you where your priorities are, and your stakeholder groups can be racked and stacked, and you can do consolidations and aggregations to highlight priorities.
And the ones that have been
Ashley?
done, at least so far, have included questions about elevation data and imagery and a number of other products.
Yep.
Ashley, I think you just signed up for a 3DEP interest group meeting presentation.
I'd be happy to do that.
All right, we'll follow up with you, give folks some idea of what's involved with the survey and how it might benefit them, and get them engaged.
Okay, thanks.
Okay, great. So if you have additional questions, we've got a pretty small Q&A this time. I'm not sure we'll publish it. Please reach out to Phil or I or any of our speakers today. We can get you their contact information. The forum is usually the third Wednesday of each month. And we substitute that with an interest group quarterly. So if you have a topic or you would like to share or you would like to have discussed as a group, please reach out to Phil and I and let us know, Phil and me, and let us know. And also the next forum is scheduled for November 16th. I don't see Josh on the participant list, but he's going to give us an update on their EDH mapping pilot work on the 16th. And then come December, as I said, we will not have our interest group meeting due to some other conflicts. And I know you guys are heartbroken. We could get together if you're really missing time there. Thank you. Thanks to our speakers. We've wanted to hear from you for a long time. You delivered more data than I could process. I encourage everybody to please go look at the study. And you can use the Jamboard or reach out to the presenters individually, because this is a study they want used and they want it promoted. And I saw one of the recommendations on the Jamboard that I really liked was something of a guideline on how I can use and apply or use the study for my own coordination and outreach in my own state. So please follow up with folks as you're able. And thank you guys for hanging in the full hour and a half. Thank you all. We'll call it a day.
Thanks for giving us a forum.
Thank you very much for the platform.